There's a commandment about keeping the seventh day holy. Again and again, people say that, that that's from the Mosaic laws. It's one of the Ten Commandments. And then all the Ten Commandments are equal. That's true. Well, we read in Exodus 16 that God made this commandment for the people to rest and keep the Sabbath holy before he gave the Ten Commandments to Moses on Mount Sinai. He commanded, this commandment is not a new commandment. He commanded the people in the Garden of Eden, which of course was Adam and Eve. In Genesis 2:3, it says there that then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work, which God created and made. Now God expected Adam and Eve to keep the Sabbath. He expected all generations since then to do that. All believers, that includes us. And God requires us to keep the Sabbath for eternity. The Sabbath, that means to celebrate and rest and have peace. Those two things, rest and peace in Jesus Christ. That's what we're to do. That is a celebration of looking forward to the day in the future when we will celebrate the Sabbath with God. What a celebration. Now, the Israelites, they were to keep the seventh day holy. And that would show they had faith in God by doing this. But their faith became weak, and it became easy for them to go astray again and again. And they did not keep the commandment. And God told them, he said, don't work on the Sabbath. No, I don't want you to be concerned about worldly things either. God wanted them to keep the Sabbath for him, but they rebelled against him. They didn't do this. And he said, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? You see, for the Lord has given you the Sabbath, so the people rested on the seventh day. God said that when we break one of his commandments, really, we're breaking all of the commandments. The Israelites failed to keep the Sabbath, and that meant that they were failing to obey God. And that meant that they were failing to love God. Now, when we fail to keep the Sabbath, we're failing to obey God also, and we're failing to love God. We also are breaking all of the laws. Now, if we keep the commandment of keeping the Sabbath and sacrificing to Christ, and we're doing that, are we really doing it? Or are we really keeping the Sabbath? It's kind of vague if we're not. Some people, they don't care. They think that's not an important commandment. They say, I don't care. It's not really important because it's just keeping the Sabbath a day. But God says that it's important and we need to do it. And if we want to show our love to God, then we need to obey all of his commandments, including that one. So it's important that we rest on the Lord's Day. The Lord's Day, what does that mean? Well, that's a word that people use that term today, and that's talking about Sunday or the Sabbath. Now, back in Moses' time, it was called the Sabbath, and some people call it the Lord's Day today. But people keep that day on different days. Sometimes it's on Sunday, sometimes it's on a Saturday. Sometimes they have to work on Sunday, and they go and worship on Saturdays. They're off on one of the other days, and that's the day that they would keep the Sabbath. Sometimes they can't help it. For instance, a fireman, sometimes they take turns and some work on Sunday, some work on Saturday, and they go back and forth, and so it just depends on their schedule. Now, all the people who work on the Sabbath, they need to find another day to rest. I want to ask you, what do you do to keep the Sabbath holy? What do you do? Well, some people believe that you can't cook on the Sabbath. You have to cook before and be ready for the Sabbath. And there's other people, they believe that you stay at home and you don't travel anywhere on the Sabbath. There's many different opinions on this. It depends on the individual. I know that there's a Jewish rabbi, and he decided that when he rests on the Lord's Day, that he won't use the computer. He won't send out any emails, nothing. He won't even touch the computer on that day. So there's different opinions. Some people say you don't go to the movies, or you don't play sports. And you understand that, the point is, whatever you do, you don't do your normal everyday things on that day. Like, for instance, what I do, I don't make any vlogs on Sunday. I do them from Monday to Saturday, but on Sunday I don't do those. It's an important point that we need to love God. We need to obey God. Obeying Him is keeping His Sabbath holy. Now, this has nothing to do with salvation. I want you to know this. Keeping the law of this, continuously being diligent about that doesn't give you salvation. It has nothing to do with your salvation. I want you to understand that. If a person refuses to obey the law and keep the Sabbath, now, this does show that his heart, that maybe he's not saved. Maybe he's not a true believer if he's refusing to keep the Sabbath.